what's your hot take on whether or not Bitcoin is a shitcoin or actually has some utility?
Well, that's kind of complicated, but I'm generally thumbs down on Bitcoin.
Welcome to the Deep Chat.
Okay. So why are you generally thumbs down on Bitcoin?
I think the benefits the technology gives us don't outweigh its drawbacks, and that in its current form, it's not really viable as a currency, which is kind of what its intent was. And it's being used as sort of a gambling type device. And that's really what it's amounted to at this point. That doesn't mean we're not going to have blockchain-based technology long into the future, that currencies won't have something like a Bitcoin thing or that it'll evolve into something better. But in its current state, I don't think it's long-term sustainable.
All right. So my hot take on that is that Bitcoin is effectively a shitcoin. As you said, it doesn't solve any direct problems other than one, which is a settlement layer for people's transactions to slowly settle out. It's not fast at that. It's not really a transactional.
Not at all. It's incredibly slow.
It's not a transactional layer. Doesn't do that fast. It doesn't do transaction fast. It settles them over some amount of time, and it settles them reliably in a distributed fashion without a central role. But that's not really solving a problem we haven't solved anywhere else, right?
Well, there are novel things Bitcoin does nothing else does.
Okay,
like
what?
Being a public ledger is pretty interesting, that anyone can go check it.
Oh yeah, that's being decentralized. Yep. Is
well, Visa's decentralized.
Yeah, well, no, not in the sense of the way that we're talking about in the context of Bitcoin. Visa owns all the databases and everything, even though those databases live across the globe. In that sense, Visa, the company, is decentralized, but it is not decentralized like Bitcoin in the sense that nodes or the database, which is similar to a node in Bitcoin, live across the globe, owned by many different people and many different companies.
Yeah. So that's another accolade we should give Bitcoin, is its resilience.
Sure, but a functional problem, a problem within society, or a problem that is scalable and useful to many people, is it really solving a problem like that? Is it solving a societal problem like censorship, or a problem like, for instance, websites going down? Is it solving a problem like that? Like,
well, here's one thing it's doing. So another accolade we should give it is its anonymity. I mean, that could go both ways, but there are positive
There's
things.
no anonymity there.
There sort of is, if you know how to do it correctly.
Sort of.
And I've heard stories of people in I don't even know where, so I'll just say this vaguely, but bad places undergoing regime change who need to flee for, be a refugee, and that Bitcoin is the only mechanism by which they can extract the wealth they've acquired and move it. So for people like that, it was a godsend.
Sure. Okay. There's always some minor utility for a cryptocurrency, even as simple as Bitcoin. Because remember, Bitcoin, when we'll talk about the alternatives to Bitcoin, Bitcoin was the first mover, so we got to give it some credit there. Right now, its value is definitely based on scarcity.
For sure.
And it is, like you said, it does amount to some amount of gambling, and people are going to extract money from it. The question is, what happens when all the coins are mined? They're going to have to put in another incentive system to allow people to be rewarded for keeping the nodes up and running, because that's how it works, is you need a reward to keep a node running in Bitcoin, and the reward is mining Bitcoins, right? So what happens when they're all mined? And if I'm not mistaken, that does end at some point.
Yep.
I could be wrong.
You're 100% correct.
It's also possible, though, that it tapers off over the next 10 years.
If it goes asymptote to zero or actual zero, that I don't know, but it's effectively zero at some point.
Yeah, well, but it doesn't matter, because Bitcoins are infinitely divisible.
True.
Well, not infinitely. We shouldn't say. Probably a long, maybe, or I don't know.
Then the IEEE floating point precision.
Yeah, for those who don't know, like computers can accurately hold a certain size number, right?
Right.
So that's what we're joking about. If you reach that limit, they would have had to come up with another way to store a larger number, which is entirely
Yep.
possible. And that number's so large that it shouldn't matter, but and it probably wouldn't matter for many, many dozens of years or tens, I don't know, a decade to multiple decades. But either way, those are questions that I would ask. And the reason I say that it's closer to a shitcoin is because other second and third generation coins are actually trying to solve problems that could be useful for society at large. You take a look at Ethereum, and it's akin to investing in Ethereum is akin to investing in a company, right? Not in a currency. You're not buying an Ethereum token and calling it a currency. And that's one of the worst things that happened to crypto is they called it cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are not a currency. You're investing in a distributed platform and affect a company. So if you think of it like investing in a company, it flips it a little bit. Ethereum is akin to a company in this way.
Wait,
So a
sorry, one
company
thing, when you say investing in a company, do you just mean investment or are you making a specific distinction?
No, just mean investment.
Investment,
If
okay.
you're going to put $2,000 into Ethereum,
Versus a
it's like
CD
you're
or whatever.
versus a CD versus the stock
Yep.
market versus anything. You are making an investment
Okay.
on the hopes of a return, which is sometimes risky. The way that a typical company works is they have an expense. Let's say it's a software company. There's a database that lives somewhere, and that costs money to run. Okay, so they need to make up the cost of that within their business model. So their business model needs to account for it, and they need to make some money on top of the cost of the database that's running. So you roll all that up, you go, okay, it costs me $1 a minute to run my company. So now I need to at least make $2 a minute, so that would be 100% profit. And I need to be able to pay for all those utilities. The difference here is that's a centralized company. That's a company that owns all of its equipment, its hardware. Um, it it's one place where you go to get that information that's in the database, right? With Ethereum, we're talking about distributed applications that change the way the business is run, right? On Ethereum, you store information. So think of it like the database, except it's stored on all the nodes, and a node is like a little piece of Ethereum spread across the globe. And there can be one, there could be 100,000. I actually don't know how many there are, how many people participating, how many you and I, how many other people are out there standing up these nodes. Mm-hmm. Anyone can do it.
Sure.
That's the thing. Anyone can do it and participate in the company that is Ethereum by standing up a node and getting money or Ethereum tokens in return. And Ethereum tokens can then be turned into US dollars, the yuan, or whatever other currency you choose. So this distributed application actually is trying to solve problems. It's trying to allow people to scale a business without as much capital to get started, because now you're distributing your application across the blockchain, and companies are incentivized to house your data, not because you have a contract with them, but because just starting a node gives you returns in Ethereum tokens. So you're getting money in return for providing the utility or the database, in a sense, for others to use. And that problem works well when you have thousands of nodes doing this. And that's why it's similar. So when you buy an Ethereum token, you're saying, I have faith that this network or this company or this network of nodes will succeed at delivering applications that people need.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's my long-winded way of explaining why it's completely and utterly different. Bitcoin and Ethereum are two wholly different things. And the second, third generation of crypto, quote unquote, currencies, which I think is a shitty name,
Sure,
should
absolutely.
just be crypto. What is it called?
Just blockchain.
Blockchain technology.
Yeah.
Let's just call it blockchain
Yeah.
technology, because the whole crypto thing doesn't really help, because it's associated with cryptocurrency. So blockchain technologies really are fundamental, I think, to creating wholly new business models, whereas Bitcoin doesn't do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
It literally does none of that. None of what I just described. The only thing it does is say, hey, here's these bits and bytes that are somehow worth some money, because we all say they're worth some money, and we've all agreed that there's scarcity and we want one. So therefore the price goes up. And while that's okay, I don't think it's any different personally than the value of a piece of art or the value of gold, or we all agreed that those things have value, and the market sets the value. So I'm totally fine with Bitcoin, but let's not aggrandize it and say,
Yeah.
and put all our energy towards Bitcoin, because it really, in the long run, it has problems.
For sure.
And I don't think that it is the thing that's people are going to remember, other than historically 10 years from now. I think it will fade into oblivion, because large corporations are going to extract as much money from it as possible, and that's going to make a lot of people lose money. And that cycle will continue. And yes, it will be driven up. I think Bitcoin will go up from here. I do believe that. But that cycle will end. It's not going to be, $5 million per Bitcoin.
Right.
Because at some point, it's just not really solving a problem.
For sure.
Yeah, there's my rant.
No, I agree pretty wholeheartedly. I'm maybe a little less I would say I'm less optimistic. I'm not as bullish as you are about where Ethereum may go, but I'm very curious to follow it and see what happens. I believe there's potential there.
Yeah, I think the third generation ones might even do better than Ethereum. I think Ethereum is second generation.
And you mean by third is like the proof of stake over proof of work stuff?
Yeah, yes, right. So I think they're the largest use of blockchain technology has not really reared its head yet, in my opinion.
Probably.
There's going to be a lot of churn right now. There's going to be a lot of people dipping their toes in and finding out what works and what doesn't. There is currently a blockchain implementation that records high-end products and whether or not they are valid or not fake. So like Prada is using it. All these high-end manufacturers of clothing and things are going to be using this
Provenance?
to verify yes, for provenance,
Okay.
for authenticity.
That's
Absolutely.
fair. That's an actual legitimate use case.
Right. But so what we're going to see is, I think, more and more of these sort of pop-up blockchains that experiment with finding utility. And in the case of Provenance, it was started by an external company, but they brought in, Prada, they brought in all these companies because they have an incentive to run the nodes. That's one novel, I would say, use of blockchain.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think that we'll start to see, places like Ticketmaster.
I like that one, yeah.
Places like Ticketmaster try to have their own blockchain. Like Mark Cuban has even talked about having one for the Dallas Mavericks, right?
Sure.
So that they can control the reselling of those tickets. So
I think that's a wonderful implementation, yes.
I think there will be a lot of uses of blockchain. Many of them will obscure into the background, but it's a question of which ones will generate the most value for the broader populace. Is there one that's going to be sort of the breakout? So Ethereum is in a way promising to be all things to anyone who wants to write smart applications, distributed applications. As those smaller blockchains sort of fade into unaware, we won't even be aware we're using them.
Right, yeah.
The larger blockchains that promise to deliver all things, like Ethereum, in a way, is saying, we're going to allow you to write any application on the Ethereum blockchain and store your data. I think that it has its problems and it's of scalability. Could you put Facebook onto the blockchain?
I mean, you could, but what would be the point?
Well, could you really though?
You could put any. If
Think
it's
about that.
Turing complete, you could put anything on it.
Yeah, but think about the processing required to do that, and how how much value would have to suddenly be, and data would have to suddenly be put into the blockchain. So, are you going to ask every single node to store petabytes of data? No.
That's another challenge to the technology. Yet that is a severe limit. That means it doesn't apply to all problems. But it's not like Facebook had a desperate need for all of Facebook to get on the blockchain. If there was some important thing, like, I don't know, like they wanted to track genealogy better and we needed to really know who was your family or not, like that's a smaller problem they might use the blockchain for, but not all of Facebook. Yeah.
I'm just showing the extreme example of where some of these things break down,
Yeah.
right? So your application set is limited with something like Ethereum or even blockchain technologies. You would have to have dramatic shifts in, how the blockchain network speeds. You would have to have a dramatic shift in network speeds and computational power and latency to make it reasonable for some of these applications to actually succeed.
Yeah.
Right. But throwing out those extreme cases, you have to pick your application sets pretty carefully. Like, Ticketmaster, replacing Ticketmaster with a blockchain could be done today.
Yeah, should be done today.
It's the transaction. The number of transactions isn't that high.
Right.
The traceability of those and the smart contracts being on top of it is a brilliant solution.
And the absolutely low amount of service consumers get for the high fees they pay.
Right, and much of which doesn't go back to the actual artist, etc. So there's I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing these things, but again, Bitcoin doesn't do any of that. It doesn't.
Right.
I don't want people to be confused.
But the underlying technology upon which Bitcoin was built offers other opportunities, and these are some good examples.
One of the utilities of Bitcoin that we didn't talk about was the fact that it is indeed very traceable. I know everybody says it's not, but you have an address, and that address is a series of numbers and letters, and it is anonymous at first, but if someone knows your Bitcoin address, then that one is yours as a human being. They can look at every transaction history
by design
you've ever made by design. Okay, so I think the federal government, if I were the federal government, I would love this FUD that Bitcoin is used for illicit transactions, because I just sit back and go, okay, you keep thinking that, and even if it is, they want like, it's better than cash.
In that regard, yeah.
In that regard, it's better than cash.
Because
they're
cash,
able to start,
maybe the serial numbers and you could trace them later, but once it's gone, it's gone.
Right, and it's so this public blockchain on Bitcoin, anybody can really download it.
Yep.
You think the federal government hasn't started a node where they participate and they monitor every single transaction on the blockchain?
That absolutely happens.
Yeah.
It would be irresponsible for it not to happen.
It would be, exactly. It would be irresponsible. Do you think they haven't cross-cataloged and cross-referenced the IDs of people on the blockchain to their real-world identities?
They probably have a team working on stuff like that, yes.
They probably do.
Which, as long as it has process around it, is a good thing. I'm a little hesitant about overreaching, like all the Snowden stuff basically could happen again here, but there's criminal activity there, and therefore the government should be looking to trace those criminals, without a doubt.
Yeah. It's public information.
Yeah.
It's like the geotags on Twitter.
Yep.
Those are public information. There's nothing to say that the government can't look at every single one of those and build a database based off it and track everybody's movement.
But to touch on anonymity, you're right, it's a public ledger. Everybody can see your anonymous ID. So if you're kind of basic in how you do things, you can figure it all out. I could even maybe figure out who you are based on your purchasing or spending habits and stuff like that. But if you're a person who understands all this and you want to shift the money around in ways where it can't be found, you can do that. You may make errors and therefore get caught, but it is possible.
Well, there's a lot of hoops to jump
through,
right?
Yep.
For instance, first you would open up a wallet, a new one
A bunch of them,
somewhere,
probably.
and yep, a bunch of them. You wouldn't use Coinbase or any provider. You would go straight to these underground exchanges. You would use cold storage, which is a little hardware device that stores your crypto. I have one right here. That's Trezor. Anyway, so Trezor makes a really good one, but of course you would do that. Then, let's say some some money was transferred to you, you would then have to wash it in some way as well. You have to assume that when it was sent to you, that the other side is compromised. So let's say it's an illicit transaction.
I'm a drug dealer. You're going to buy drugs from me, and you send me Bitcoins.
Right. You got to assume that the buyer is compromised, and that buyer might be someone that they know who it is, and it's traceable. So now they can see that transaction was between you and the buyer.
Well, they know you gave me money. That's it.
They know you gave me money, right?
Or they know you gave
maybe they're
XO9107 money.
Right, but they're tracking that other person. So now that person gave you money. If the other side is known to be illicit, they're doing something illicit, then you in turn are going to get tracked, right? Because they're going to say, okay, now this address wallet is suspicious. Now we need to go and dig and find out who owns it. In some cases, that might take some time, but the seller on the other end is likely at that point to move their money as quickly as possible, or they should, which is what blows my mind in this recent, I don't know if you've seen the recent news about the ransomware.
Yeah, I was going to try and shift to this at some point.
The pipeline was held at ransom. They paid the ransom in Bitcoin, and it was an oil pipeline held at ransom. They said they were going to shut it down if they didn't get this Bitcoin. They got the Bitcoin, and then the federal government a couple weeks later, maybe it was a month later, was able to return most of those Bitcoins.
Right. My understanding is that they had kind of infiltrated and took over the criminal organization.
This is the other way in which it happens, right? So they did not break Bitcoin. There was no breaking of Bitcoin.
Not at all.
They didn't hack it. They didn't. They don't have a supercomputer or a quantum computer somewhere where it was figuring out how to crack the code so that it could transfer the money. No, that didn't happen. They're called private keys. It did not crack private key encryption.
Correct.
Right? What happened was they infiltrated, and this is my guess, actually I haven't read the article, is they infiltrated another organization, or they found out who was the custodian of the wallet. So, for instance, Coinbase is a custodian of many people's crypto wallets. Okay, that means they hold them for you, and they are responsible for them. If the federal government could say, look, you are housing this wallet in which we transferred $50 million, and it was used in a ransom attack, we want that money back. Well, Coinbase is going to say, okay, it's a court order. We have to do that.
Right.
Just like right now with fiat currency, if a bank, receives a $50 million in a ransom attack, wired to a certain account, they can unwind that transaction. So it's not very different in the sense of someone being a custodian of your wallet. But in the other case where they may have infiltrated this criminal organization or group of hackers or whatever it was, they may have just gotten access to their private keys.
Yeah, I think that's
likely
what happened. Yeah.
They got access to their private keys because private keys have to be stored somewhere.
So you compromise that machine, boom, you got them.
Right.
And it's surprising how insecure a lot of these people are. Every once in a while we'll hear a story of some cybersecurity case, and invariably when they catch the guy, the Silk Road guy or whoever, they are not souped up locally with all the high-tech stuff. They have like a notepad file on a desktop with passwords in it.
Right. Yeah. It may be that.
Or at least the ones that get caught.
Yeah. That's true. I'm not going to tell you where I keep my my cold storage. You have a bunch of passphrases. Everybody thinks Bitcoin's anonymous. No, it's not really that anonymous.
We should say pseudo-anonymous.
Technically, it's pseudo-anonymous, right? It's anonymous until someone cross-references you. And it's similar to the UUIDs that were used for quite some time. On the internet, they had these unique IDs for people. And they knew that these were people associated with these unique IDs. And that was all fine, right? Because you didn't have identifying information.
Right. You were just person number one or whatever.
Right. Over time, they started to correlate and build identifying information associated with each UUID. So now you actually know who the person is by their name. That's very similar to what's going on in Bitcoin and crypto.
Yep.
Is that they are going to build information about this unique ID and the person who's associated with it. Now, I'm okay with that because, that regulation might help me in some point because I'm not doing illicit things.
Yeah.
But the larger crypto community might not be okay with that. They want anonymity. There are groups working on blockchains that are completely and utterly anonymous, where everything is hashed to where you can't see the actual address anymore, and the algorithm takes care of that. So whether or not those take off, I don't know. I suspect that is where the illicit transactions will go to in some way. But at some point, it will be regulated to the point of oblivion, because if you actually run one of those nodes, you will be shut down or whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think the federal government doesn't. They've just been quiet because the lie is that Bitcoin is anonymous, and it's really pseudo anonymous. Yeah, go on thinking that. Go on, publish that information. Keep it out there, because we're totally happy letting you do that. They've been collecting information for such a long time. They've probably mined it and learned so much about it, just like they mined, everything else.
Sure.
Public Twitter information, publicly available UUIDs associated with a person.
Yeah.
Facebook did it, right? And that was the great leak. Cambridge Analytica.
Right.
That's what that all revolved around, correlating people with their online identities.
No, good information. And excellent point about pseudo-anonymity. So neither of us are pro-Bitcoin. How long do you think it's going to last?
Well, I'd have to do some research in terms of when mining stops being profitable. But I think it'll be before that. I think there'll be too much pressure on Bitcoin to change to something that doesn't consume as much electricity, just because that's in the zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
And that's the narrative today. So I think it's going to drive money to other types of blockchain technologies.
That makes sense.
Right. And I think people are going to start to see value in things that are second, third, and who knows what fourth generation are going to look like. But I think that's where the money's going to flow at some point. They're going to extract as much from Bitcoin as possible. And so maybe 2 years.
Oh, that's recent, you think? There could be a crash of some kind?
I mean, there's typically a crash. What is it, I don't know. I think there's a metric for that, but it does crash.
Sure.
Like, it's currently in what most would call a crash. It's half its value than it was a month ago. So 2 years. I say 2 years because I think people are starting to get savvy to blockchain technologies, and they're going to start to understand how to invest in them. And there's enough institutional money flowing into understanding crypto and blockchain that you're going to start to have institutional knowledge, and they're going to drive money to things that they can extract more dollars from, and that have a better design, frankly. I mean, it's not to say Bitcoin isn't novel and amazing, and what it's accomplished is unreal.
Yes.
But it is still, in today's light and in today's information, closer to what we would define as a shitcoin.
Yeah.
Like it's similar to Dogecoin. Dogecoin doesn't solve any problems. And Bitcoin limits out, I think, at 24 some odd million shares or coins. Dogecoin, I'm not sure what its limit is, but fundamentally they're almost identical. If I'm not mistaken, some of the the Bitcoin source code is in Dogecoin.
Yeah.
What's making us say that Dogecoin's a shitcoin and Bitcoin isn't?
Marketing.
Because most people are saying shitcoin. They're calling Dogecoin a shitcoin. Why is it a shitcoin?
Well, for all the reasons you listed out that Bitcoin also has.
Right. So why aren't we calling it a shitcoin? Why aren't we calling Bitcoin a shitcoin?
Yeah.
Because there's too much institutional money in it now.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
then there's too many people invested in it to call it that. Now, Elon Musk, I love him and hate him. He has, swung the market, but he's pointed it out. He's literally pointing it out by, spiking a Dogecoin, and he's pointing out the insanity between the two. They're almost the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's intentionally what he's doing. I mean, maybe he's got some 3D chess stuff going on, where he's trying to buy more Bitcoin.
Could be.
But it's just supply and demand at this point.
Yeah.
So second, third generation blockchain technology, I'm more of a fan
Yeah.
of.
I would agree. And it'll be good to see where everything goes.